Charles, each day, something stupider than the day before unfolds under this corrupt Joe Biden administration. How are you today, Charles?
Well, I'm very well, thanks for asking, Jason. And what a great job the art department has done again. I literally opened this thing up very early in the morning, your time, and I think I may have caused neighbors in this hotel to wonder what the hell was going on in my room. I was laughing out loud so hard.
I'm glad to hear that. This is obviously Joe Biden is pretty dumb on the beach there, Rehoboth. He's got nothing to say to people who got burned up in Hawaii. Pretty disgraceful. I can't even
Go
really
ahead.
remember. Is that?
Go ahead.
I can't even really remember what this movie was about, but definitely Joe Biden is dumb wherever he goes. So he's dumb on the beach, and we'll discuss Memoirs.
Yeah, I mean, what's reported over here that he may have done since the art department produced this magnum opus here is that he apparently was interacting with somebody and he couldn't remember. He had a brain fart again in the middle of some kind of speech where he couldn't remember where this wildfire was, which, the Big Island is not Maui. And he made some
Right.
comment about he couldn't remember where these fires were occurring. I mean, I can reveal where I am now, and it's in Norway. And what's very interesting to me, fortunately, you and I and others have some good friends. In my case, that go back decades, who many decades, who can say without really having to beat around the bush too much, as these people have said in the last little while here, that you got to understand, Charles, because we understand you already live in a banana republic if you're lucky. It's only as bad as Haiti.
Right.
In terms of being a banana republic. It is preposterous for this buffoon, this criminal buffoon, who but for the grace of God, would be, retired as, I don't know, not even the manager of the French fry department of McDonald's. This guy, as Bob Gates, the first Secretary of Defense under Obama, a Republican, said in his book, Joe Biden has gotten every aspect, every major domestic and foreign policy decision of his life completely wrong. And that's been proven, I think, in the short while here. It's proven on a daily basis. This man is a criminal ignoramus. And maybe you change that M to an N. I mean, he is just, it's disgusting what is happening under his watch. To our cities, to our children, to our educational system, to the dollar, to inflation, and especially to the poor under this idiot, whose family, it seems, has managed to work with corrupt elements in the press, which could include 100% of the mainstream press, corrupt elements in the deep state, which by definition is corrupt, to cover up the many ways in which Bidens and people like the Bidens have sold America out for a song. It seems most likely there are a lot of countries involved in the Biden case, but the big one for me is likely China. And it's just crystal clear when you look at this with, as the Democrats like to say, with clear eyes, which none of them have. When you look at this with clear eyes, and you ask yourself, in what position was China when Kissinger first went there? Were they really a threat to the United States back then? They were eating fucking dirt in China
And liking it.
and we had just won World War II, with the help of the Soviet Union, actually, the considerable help of the Soviet Union. By 1948-49, the Chinese were miserably poor. They had nothing to speak of in terms of an industrial or military apparatus, except for people, which they could throw at problems, throw to their deaths. They wanted to. And we were unscourged inside our borders, save for the tragedy out there in Hawaii, in Pearl Harbor. We were unscathed in terms of our infrastructure. Major portions of the European infrastructure had been destroyed. We had leveled Tokyo, firebombed Tokyo. We firebombed Dresden. Large portions of the industrial production capacity of the world lay in ruins, save for ours. General Motors had a 90% world market share. I know this from other work that I've done in 1952. 90% world market share. There was no Japanese car industry to speak of. And, you know, now then scroll forward to 72 when, quote, Nixon did us the favor of opening up China. Was that truly a favor on balance? And then we go and Poppy Bush gets together with that Scowcroft character at Rockefeller, and you know, this who am I thinking of? Oh, Kissinger, Dr. K, and they thrust us into a new world order where our private sector gets crushed. As I think even Bobby Kennedy so enjoyed. We'll talk about the Kennedy latest interview with Tucker in the First Amendment Forum. But you know, this new world order has been a disaster for most people in the private sector who aren't on the government tit, you know, the way so many of the big multinational companies remain. The average, you know, mom and pop private sector worker has been crushed and faces now great peril. Even, you know, even as people have trumpeted in the past Obamacare, RFK claims, and I don't know if it's true, that both food stamps and Medicare have been dramatically cut in recent months, in part as a consequence of these idiotic acts, which supposedly are going to reduce inflation and build out our infrastructure, that instead are causing inflation to rage yet again. So, you know, I look at this Biden guy, and it's interesting. You know, when America was on the rise, as it was under Reagan from 82 until about, you could say 86, 87 before the crash. Then it started to have trouble under Poppy, 89, the crash, and then his ridiculous move to cave to Democrats on taxes and usher in this bizarre new world order where, you know, the Soviet Union lay after 92. There was no Soviet Union. Eastern Europe, they caved RFK makes the amazing point, which I do, but I guess I've forgotten, that Gorbachev, in carving out the compromise that he did, explicitly noted that he was willing to let NATO and the West unify Germany, take East Germany under the control of West Germany. He was willing to let them do that. All he asked was that we wouldn't expand eastward, and James Baker gave his oral assurances, which we know what that's worth, that he wouldn't do it. And then Bill Clinton put the real knife in 96 and 97, and other neocon Republicans, and said, hell, let's just go as far east as we can. You know, let's put weapon systems inside now Kyiv that could level Moscow within 12 minutes. Let's do that and think that the Russians aren't going to care about, because we don't need to study the history. You know, and so with me, it's like I reached the point that Biden needed to go many months ago. And, you know, Joe Biden was not elected, forgetting 2020, you know, details for a second. He wasn't elected under a mandate that he could shred the Constitution and put his greatest rivals in jail on false pretenses, claiming that it was the independent work of his attorney general who reports to him. I mean, this stinks to high heaven, what he's doing. Every time there's a major, as Rantingly points out today, my time, every time there has been a major negative development in the news about the Biden family business of extortion, corruption, racketeering, and other crimes, every time that happens, within 24 hours, Trump gets indicted by somebody. Now, the irony here is that what these people don't seem to get who are following this strategy is that every time this happens, and I think in an accelerating way, Trump to the positive, every time this happens, the ordinary person looks at this and says, this could happen to me. This didn't happen under Trump. Trump didn't do this. He maybe should have done it to the Clintons, but he didn't. And, you know, I think Merrick Garland should, whether he resigns, whether he's impeached or not, he will be condemned in any kind of future that involves me living in America, right? If we get to the place where we celebrate this type of behavior, I don't want to live in America.
We're there, Charles. You know, people are, you know, lauding this nonsense. If you look at Andrew Weissman's timeline on there. There's a large number of people. Maybe they're sock puppet accounts, but I don't think so. Some of the people who are responding to my comments to Andrew Weissman, I've got a process that I won't explain that I use to evaluate Twitter accounts, and I see a lot of them that seem to be operated by real people who are just in the thrall of this nonsense.
Well, again, if you are in favor, as people used to tell me, and I think it's true, that whether you're getting C's or not, or whatever the equivalent would be in a law school, there's a bottom half of every class. And I think they say with regard to MBAs that you want to be in the the 25th to the 75th percentile. You don't want to be at the top of the class. You obviously don't want to be in the very bottom, but you want to be somewhere in the middle. I don't think that should apply in medical school. I don't care to have a doctor treat me who wants to tell me about his feelings and how he feels about today and how he feels about, or she feels about, what sort of I want somebody who has aced the MCATs, who is really good in math and science, who is that rare person who also can speak and write English or whatever language we're relying on in whatever country we're in. And same in the law. The legal eagles that I have dealt with in the past were freaking great at analyzing problems, and they understood the dangers posed by letting our legal system become partisan. That is not what you won't find the words political party in the Constitution by design. The founders had a personal experience in their families and even themselves with the degree to which factions, what they called parties back then, had infected the administration of justice under a king who was at that point mad, kind of like this idiot. He was completely boffo mad. To the point where I wouldn't think that it would make any sense in trying to craft a solution with America right now in speaking to Joe Biden. I just wouldn't. I'd say I don't know who's actually making the decisions, but either we're going to try to negotiate with that group of people, or we're not. And we're certainly not holding any kind of, once we resolve it, if we do, we're not holding any kind of staged press event where this bumblehead can get up there and mumble through and grope my wife if I'm going to bring her to the thing, assuming it's a guy who's trying to negotiate. You can't, in my business, original business in mergers and acquisitions and advising companies, you have to decide whether the client is somebody you want to work for, right? Because you're providing professional services in my case, and the client makes the final call on what to do, and the client can make a bad decision. Do you really want your professional career sullied by an idiot like Biden, moving away from a perfectly reasonable solution to provoke World War III for his paymasters in China? I mean, I don't think you do. And so increasingly, I think the United States under Biden, so long as he's there, will be marginalized, which is, of course, China's goal. And increasingly, I think, people are just dumbfounded that we, the people, are putting up with this garbage. And this thing about cringe, saying that she had it under her name, this tweet, and then taking it down and thinking nobody's going to notice.
Yeah.
I mean, how much of the pablum that comes out from the podium or elsewhere in press releases is drafted by idiots like Cringe and Jake Sullivan?
All of it,
others.
I would say.
All of it.
Well, Charles, just to touch on something you mentioned before, the mad king, the mad president, it really seemed like Biden was not aware of what was going on in Maui when they first asked him for a comment and he said no comment. He just looked clueless about the whole thing. And he's a week late in saying anything. Even if the guy had just put out a TikTok video saying, hey, we're getting word of this disaster in Maui, our hearts go out, I've called the director of FEMA, 5-second video within 24 to 36 hours and everything would have been fine. He waited a week to say nothing and people are still missing and dying in Maui while this guy's running around sending money to Ukraine, playing on the beach, and having Karine Jean-Pierre run his Twitter account.
Yeah, and it's, you don't want to be in a place. I mean, I do agree with many of Reagan's important observations, but one that I liked and I agree with and live my life by is trust but verify. You don't just, even if you like somebody, you're inclined to hope that they're telling you the truth. On important matters, you better verify that what they're saying you is actually true. I mean, crowdsource the truth, I think, tough to
And
disagree with that.
correct. And
Right,
correct. You might trust the person, but they could be incorrect.
right. And people do, everybody makes mistakes, even I do. And I regularly do, and I try to learn from them. But this is a group around Biden that is the definition of mistake and the definition of unwilling to learn anything. They don't have a basic understanding of economics. They think they control, because they do have substantial control over some important levers of power. For example, the news cycle outside Crowdsource the Truth and elements like it is on 100% control. I mean, there are certain major venues, certain major book outlets and book promotion efforts, certain major, I mean, Hollywood less so because it's dying at this point. TV, traditional TV less so because it's also dying. But in the political world, a limited number of people decides who gets print space, who gets interview time in key formats and venues. It's a very limited set of people. And these people, they think it's an inside game. They think, everybody's waiting. The reality is, no, we've been steered over the precipice now. People assume. I actually was shocked by the article that I sent early, and I think you have there on China. I have been benefited by Gordon Chang and John Batchelor, who for years were on NBC radio. I started going on there, I think, in 2009 or 10. And then John switched to CBS. And in recent months, I've been on many, many times with Gordon, Gordon is the first credible analyst, and he's not a finance guy, he's a lawyer, to explain that the Chinese system would inevitably collapse. He wrote a book about it in the early 2000 timeframe. Now, it's taken a lot longer than he thought for it to be on the verge of collapse. But in this article, we learned that if the numbers are to be believed, China's debt to GDP is about 300% right now. Now ours, by contrast, is like 120, 130.
Ooh.
300 is scary high. If that's
so is
true.
120, isn't it?
120 is also high, but 300 is off the chart, stupid high. And this is a long article talking about the Chinese approach to try to get consumption back. Well, consumption, as I've explained before on this broadcast, consumption is the way to think about it. It has less to do with interest rates, less to do with your balance sheet, and a lot more to do with the age structure of your population. If your population, like China's, has been, if the growth rate has been artificially constrained by an edict from on high to have one child only for decades, that then was relaxed recently, then you're going to have a greater and greater share of older people. And it's, I don't know, scientific fact. I'm not asking you to follow my science or Fauci's science, but my personal experience and the economic papers I read and studies I read suggest that as people age, they dramatically change their consumption patterns. And it is people in the age category 25 to 54 who tend to spend the most on consumption, because those are the people who, for the first time, are forming households and having children and expanding their homes, buying homes, fixing them up, buying another bigger home. And you spread that across the population and look at the experience in the United States from 1982 to 1998 or 9, where the data are crystal clear. We had a large number of people give birth after World War II, the so-called baby boomers. They came to maturity around 1982 or thereabouts. They began to be very active, and this gigantic flood of new households helped both Reagan, Poppy, and Clinton claim that there was substantial economic growth during their presidencies. The facts are that at that time there was an unusual set of developments in the underlying demographics of the American population and other Western populations. In America's case, it was also that this generation were children of people who had survived the Depression. And so those sorts of people also, there was during the Depression, the birth rates declined. Indeed, right before the Depression, in the Spanish flu year in 18, I think, this is the only time to date U.S. population went down in a year. But the constrained, the troubles starting in 1929 caused people to have fewer babies. So the mixture of these robust, active people, 25 to 54 from 82 forward, was unusually high, and the proportion of seniors was unusually low. All of that started to change radically in 2002 in this country. And now the senior
Why
share,
2002?
just the way the bubble worked, you have to
You
look
think
at
September 11th had something to do with that? People,
nothing to do with if you look at the estimates of the United States prepares good estimates in great detail of our population by actual year. Number of people less than one or less, two or less, 2 to 1, 3 to 2, et cetera. And they've done that for over 100 years. So you can go and look year by year by year. They do it male, female. And it's just very interesting what happened. And the senior share started to get very, very high. And that share is only rising now because people who might form families today, ever since really 2007, have either had the concerns of what happened in that financial crisis, 7 to 9, and then the weak recovery under Obama, which was until this idiot Biden, I might add, selected by Obama. So I think we need to revisit just how smart Obama was to put an idiot in his number two. But the whole period from 7 forward has been a period where people who should form families are not doing so. So this proportion of the higher age category being a bigger and bigger share of the economy, spending less on consumption, and certainly not, and generally, except for the politicians who seem to manage to have 5 homes or 6 homes or 4 mansions like Obama. I mean, most older people say, you know what, I don't need to live in this 4,500 or 35.
Scale down. Yeah.
They downsize. Yeah. And they go from, if they have 2, 3, 4 homes, they go to 1, maybe
Charles,
2.
Let me interrupt you for a second because we've only got about 2 minutes left here before we enter the First Amendment Forum. And we're going to be talking about the Trump indictments and lots of other stuff that YouTube would almost certainly not want us talking about. People are going to be able to join us in just a few minutes on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I also want to make sure people know, Charles, that they can follow you on x.com @Charles Ortel. Don't confuse this for Twitter. It's vastly different. It's X. And people can also follow me on there. I've been kicked off so many times. Whoops. I've got a new thing, a new X profile here. People can follow me at JG_CSTT. And Charles, before we go, there's one thing that I discovered in creating the graphic for today's show. It's interesting because, I come up with all kinds of ideas about the topics that we're going to be talking about in the search for an appropriate graphic. And of course, we've seen this one many, many times. I used a lot of members of the stupid family, the Bidens, in this image because, this is the classic American family interacting in the most bizarre ways. And it occurred to me that it's possible that the cocaine that they found, maybe it didn't belong to Hunter because there's a litany of crackheads in the Biden family. Any one of them could have brought that cocaine in. But we'll discuss this and other topics in the First Amendment Forum. People can join us there in just 5 minutes. We got a minute left here on YouTube, Charles. Anything you want to say before we make our way over there to the First Amendment Forum?
Well, I hope folks are doing their level best to enjoy the waning days of summer before school starts again. I had thought that this would be a very slow news period, but I've been proven wrong just in a few days this week. So stay tuned. Exactly. We've got a lot to talk about.
And we'll be right back. Stay with us, everybody. Join us on Odyssey and Substack, Subscribestar, and Patreon. We'll be right back. Thanks for tuning in.